Hi folks, last month I had the opportunity to speak to the IATI Annual Meeting. IATI is the International Aid Transparency Initiative that was set up, I guess, over a decade ago to try to get a hold of all the aid money that is spent around the world in a new way, in a formal way. I used to work at The Guardian newspaper, and they had a section called "Comment is Free," and it was and that phrase comes from one of their former editors, I think their first editor over 100 years ago, who said comment is free, but facts are sacred. And I said to the people at the IATI meeting, the reason we're all here is because we believe that. We believe that facts should be the basis of decision making. And I reflected on what seems like a different era. Between 2010, 11 and 2015, 3, 4, 5 years, many of us worked on building what became the Sustainable Development Goals. And it was just an assumption that they would be built as much as possible on scientific evidence. On evidence, and often evidence from the physical sciences, not just the economists. And the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data came out of that, and IATI was related to that. And I don't think we realised at the time how political it was to insist on evidence and data. But it feels that way now. And what we've got with the SDGs now, 17 SDGs, 169 targets and many more indicators, is a set of objectives for the world based on data and evidence. I mean, data sounds technical. I prefer just to say facts, evidence, information, and it is sacred. But the challenge is making that data and evidence useful, and in particular useful to communities and people that are disempowered. Because at the moment, the so-called data revolution is in danger of not really being a revolution in the sense of shifting power from one group to another. It could even increase power inequality. So while the vast majority of the world feels like they have far more information, far more data than ever before, in relative terms, they've got poorer compared to the mega companies and the governments that have magnitudes more data than ever before and are able to build policies and make decisions based on that. And that's only just started in the last 10, 15, 20 years. What's to come in the next decades is going to be many times that again. So that brings us to the purpose of initiatives like the Aid Transparency Initiative and its purpose to combat misinformation and build accountability, not just present data for the sake of it. A few years ago I actually did a review of the transparency sector, and I, with a great team, thought through the possible futures for the aid transparency movement. And I think there were 3 bits. The first was building impact, and that had to do basically with engagement. How do you turn a quite techie presentation of data into something that people everywhere can use? And one of the panels that I was on at this IATI meeting was with data journalists and people that have been able to use data to make a difference. In one case, in the country of Kenya, holding a power to account, but recognizing that it's harder and harder for professional journalists to get their stories out, their fact-based stories out, given so much, I guess, amateur analysis and influencing. And I have to admit that has kind of shocked me somewhat. I thought the democratization of communication and data would generally be a good thing, and of course there are positives, but the danger to fact-based analysis is also clear. And the other example was about the war on drugs and how the IATI data, the curated aid data provided by IATI, was able to help an analysis of how major donors had been spending money to actually further the ridiculous war on drugs that is still going on, utterly failed of course, and with huge negative impacts for many countries in the world. And so, we talked a lot about that the meeting was in Colombia, which is where I live, and so, drugs is a huge issue here, and the war on drugs is one of the greatest, I think, international policy failures of the last century, and hopefully we're moving on from it. The second thing we recommended in our report was not to see data as the end point, but rather to see it as part of a dialogue. So the usefulness of data is that you can dialogue about it, you can discuss it. And actually the process of developing data and bringing data together is an important engagement tool, rather than the idea of let's get together the data and then let's share it. The process of bringing people together to deliver the data and then discuss maybe conflicting data, because there's usually a whole bunch of conflicting data, and trying to marry it all together is an important part of understanding what's going on at a region, in a country, or globally. So, the suggestion was to focus more on data as dialogue and data as journey, rather than data as an Excel spreadsheet. And the final recommendation was about using all the lessons and approaches from the IATI experience, making aid data transparent and useful, and applying that to transparency in a whole bunch of other sectors, notably all domestic public spending, because that's crucial for any part of a society to hold their government or powerful people and powerful organisations to account. So what lessons are there from the IATI experience for broader transparency movements? We've moved from a world where we want more data to a world in which there's almost too much data to manage. How we live in this new world is going to define whether we're able to manage our planetary sustainability and our human societies. So it seems to me that the work of transparency, the work of accountability, remains incredibly important, one of the most important things that we can be doing. We've got to focus always on the applicability, the usefulness of the work we do in data management, rather than the temptation sometimes to provide perfect charts and tables without thinking through how actually they're going to shift power in favour of those who might not have it.